Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our second night of live streaming here on Seek Week.
Seek Week. I love it. That music that we play to welcome everybody, that was a good choice.
I know, I like it. It's,
grooving out to that, man.
Get into it. So, yeah, tonight we are talking all about our legislative effort. So many of you know, and for those of you who don't know, we have been working for many years now to get some essentially self-help consumer protection legislation because our organization is based in New York, because that's where the Brown family is from and where Kirby grew up. That's where we have focused our effort. So it's currently working its way through the New York State Assembly and Senate. And as we're learning, it's a long process. I actually have a master's degree in public policy, so I always try to be the voice of reason and assure people, yeah, it does take a while, and that's okay. So
not only is that
thoughts on that.
You guys, you don't even know. Just before we came on, Jean was trying to sell me and Ginny it's actually a good thing that we've taken this long, that it has evolved so much. And Ginny and I are like, yeah, but we really would just like it passed at this point, actually.
I think we started this process in 2016, or was it 15?
Yeah.
I mean, I joined the org, I think in 2016 or 17, and it was already a thing then. And we can talk a little bit about, just broadly before we get into the actual legislation, we can get into a little bit about why we as an org consider legislation to be important, right?
Right.
So Seek Safely has always had kind of two tenets to kind of what we do. On the one hand, we are an educational organization, right? We've always really prioritized, kind of that outreach and educational piece that's really directed at the consumers of self-help products and services. So we've done things like publicize red flags. And we've done things like publicize and tell the stories of not just Kirby and James and Liz, but other people who have been victimized and hurt kind of by exploitative and predatory self-help personalities and organizations. So education has always been kind of one pillar of our mission, but the other pillar has been advocacy. And something that really struck me, I can speak to when I came into the org, it was right when James Arthur Ray was making his big comeback. He had gotten out of jail, he'd gotten out of prison, and he immediately went right back into the self-help industry. And I remember thinking, should that be illegal? Like he has behaved horribly here. He demonstrably horribly. He went to prison. I was thinking about in recent years, guys, I was thinking about, you remember the Theranos scandal with Elizabeth Holmes and similar corporate scandals like that?
Mm-hmm.
When corporate executives behave badly and they're found guilty, usually as part of their punishment, they don't just go to prison, but usually there's some sort of stricture placed on them so they can't go right back into that industry. It really struck me that James could go right back into the industry. And one of the reasons for that, as we found, is that there is really very little, if any, regulation or standards of practice or ethics codes associated with the self-help industry. So we feel as an org, we're in a unique position to kind of help states start to craft some common sense legislation and regulation. And it's really kind of philosophically where our legislative effort comes from.
Exactly. Yeah. Right after, the incident in Sedona, the way we kind of framed it was we said, if this was a product, it would have been recalled.
Big time.
Because the consumers used it as directed and they died or they were harmed. And not only were they harmed, this one time, in previous years, James Ray had run the same event and people had been hurt. So it was kind of like an inevitable thing that people were going to get very hurt at this event. And yet he had continued to run this event. He had been able to run it. And as you said, Glenn, even after he was on trial and he went to prison and he served his sentence, he was able to come out and still continue in this industry because the industry itself has no formal structure to it that can, license people or give them some type of authority to practice and then revoke that authority if it's found that they're practicing in an unsafe or unethical manner. So yeah, that's exactly it. That is why right from the start, we said there's a legislative or a regulatory gap here that enables people to practice in a way that in other industries like medicine or, psychology, teaching, I mean, so many industries that have some sort of professional organization to them that protects the consumers and the users so that if that practitioner is doing something wrong, they can no longer practice. Well, the self-help industry doesn't have that. So that is why right from the beginning, we identified that as part of our mission that we felt was really an important aspect of protecting self-help consumers.
You bet.
So, yeah.
And to be clear, the legislation is really targeting people that don't have any professional credentials, that they don't have a professional license or professional credentials. Now, we do know that sometimes professionals also act irresponsibly. But as Jean is saying, people can complain. There's a place for them to go to for that person to be censured. So in New York State, this legislation is aimed at folks who are in the self-help industry that do not have a recognized professional certification, a professional degree, license of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The lack of regulation, of oversight. And trust me, like I'm not a guy, like Gene and I talk about this all the time. Like I'm not actually a guy who thinks that government regulation solves every problem we have. I'm a small business person, actually. But the lack of oversight and the lack of regulation is such that it's become a running joke that, boy, do you want to be a therapist, but you don't want to go through all that pesky school? Do you want to be a therapist and you don't want to go through all the hassle of all the red tape? Become a life coach, right? Like write a book, become a spiritual guru of some kind. Mm-hmm. And that's what we see when we talk about figures in the self-help world. This is really what we've seen done. Like folks like Keith Raniere or folks like Teal Swan. They're not credentialed, right? Now they might have great insight. I don't know if those particular examples I just cited are perfect examples of that, but whatever. They might have great insight. But the issue, like Jenny just said, is all about, look, if and when something goes wrong, if and when something goes haywire, what then? Like you can't go to an uncredentialed person and say, hey, you are behaving inconsistently with your ethics code, because the James Arthur Rays would go like, I never claimed to be a therapist. I never claimed to be a financial advisor. Why did you take my advice? Right.
Right.
So this is that gap that we're looking to fill with this legislation.
Yeah. Right. So part of what we do is, as we talked a little bit last night, we created the Seek Safely Promise, which is a promise that practitioners can take to basically just assert the fact that they have, your safety in mind, that they're going to practice ethically. And as we explained, it's a very simple set of standards, and it's not legally binding. It's just something that we created kind of as a signal to both the practitioner and to the consumer that, this is a commitment the practitioner is making. Because we said, well, in the absence of any sort of professionalism within the industry itself, we can invite practitioners who want to practice ethically to kind of make this commitment. But again, that's, just it's a completely voluntary thing, and it has no legal bearing of any kind. So we still feel that there's a space for something a little more robust.
You bet.
So yeah, as as Glenn was saying, I'm trying to tell everybody it's okay that it's taken a while. One of the things with policy and with legislation is that it can have unintended consequences. You do have to take it seriously and give it a lot of thought, what all of the kind of possible impacts of any kind of legislation or policy could be. So that's part of why it takes a long time. Another issue with this particular question of consumer self-help, consumer safety, we see bills and laws get passed really quickly when there's like some big splashy thing that happens that everybody's paying attention to, and that everybody immediately says, oh my gosh, we need some law to fix this or to deal with this. And then sometimes there are big splashy issues. We have many examples in the US right now where even though those are big splashy issues, it still takes a long time for legislation to go through because there might be some disagreement about what that should look like.
You bet.
With this issue of self-help consumer safety, for our family, there was a big splashy incident that pointed to this. But for, society at large, there hasn't been the kind of attention on this issue that would help to push some kind of law or legislation through in a very quick manner. So that's part of also why it's been this kind of gradual process.
Sure. Well, and you hit on a really relevant issue of like, well, when there is that big splashy event, there's very often a cultural impetus to do something.
Mm-hmm.
But something that our organization has been really looking to highlight is that, so sure, there are these terrible things that happen. There is the Sedona, or the, what Nexium turned into with DOS, right? Sure, there are those events. But something our organization has really sought to raise consciousness about is the fact that self-help events and organizations and personalities are often predatory and exploitative way before that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way they do business is often predatory and exploitative, even before you get to the point of tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the case that when they have these big splashy events, or when these big splashy events happen, and then there's a conviction, right? Like, so James went to prison for less than 2 years, but he did go to prison. He was convicted. Keith Raniere is convicted to 99 years or whatever. And we get it in our head as a culture like, oh, the system works. The bad guy got caught. Something that we really want to raise consciousness about the fact is, A, there are lots more bad guys out there because of the way that the industry enables, their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also the case that if you look at some of these convictions, even Raniere and James Arthur Ray, it wasn't an easy thing to convict them. In fact, James Arthur Ray was he was convicted of negligent homicide. He's originally charged with, correct me if I'm wrong, manslaughter, right?
Correct.
The legal system has to bend over backwards sometimes to actually convict these guys. Keith Raniere had to be convicted on trafficking charges, actually. Had he not taken that extra step, he might not have gotten convicted.
Mm-hmm. In the trial, the prosecutor was unable to show that he had prior knowledge that this was dangerous, which is needed to prove manslaughter. But he did have prior knowledge. People had been harmed before. Someone had warned him the year before that if you continue to do this, someone is going to die. He knew what he was doing was very risky, and yet he continued to do it. The people at Angel Valley were concerned about his behavior. People on his teams were concerned. So he had prior knowledge, but the judge would only allow information that was pertinent to the 2.5 hours that people were actually in the sweat lodge.
Mm-hmm.
So it was almost impossible for her to prove prior knowledge so that he would have been convicted of manslaughter. So we learned that it's a court of law, not necessarily justice. And that his lawyers were able to pull up different things to prevent really important information from coming before the jury.
Mm-hmm.
So, this legislation is important because it also puts the whole issue kind of on the radar of people who are responsible for people's safety. We're
Yeah.
a very safety conscious country, and like, I'd like to piggyback on Dr. Doyle. I don't necessarily like legislation and regulation. I grew up in the 60s. We're like not for that kind of stuff, even, like when seatbelts came in, it took a while, So I'm not like all for everything being regulated all the time. But there's so much egregious, potentially damaging behavior on the part of some of these practitioners that there has to be something on the books that tries to reel them in.
Mm-hmm.
You bet.
And in going back to talking about kind of what happened in the trial, I personally feel that if this incident had happened now, more recently, and if the trial was happening now more recently, as opposed to it was back in 2011, I think the outcome would actually be quite different. Because again, I think that our understanding of what is happening in these types of settings has evolved. Our understanding of coercive control has evolved. Even in the legal system is starting to get a much better handle on the concept of coercive control. And so again, this is part of why the legislation, the bill that we have has evolved. It has gone through many iterations. The very first version of the bill was very bare bones. It really didn't have a lot of detail. And I remember when, we first saw it, we kind of said, okay, well, at least there's something, right? At least there's something here. And it's not perfect, but, at least it's something. Whereas the last couple of versions of the bill have had a lot more detail, including language specifically mentioning coercive control, which is important, and also kind of spelling out in more detail some of the activities that we're talking about that could be potentially harmful. So again, I think this is why, in a way, it's kind of good that, the bill has had this time to evolve, and that I think that what we are ending up with now, which is hopefully, actually going to get to the floor to be voted on in the legislative session in 2024, I think that version of the bill will be a lot more impactful than the original bill that we had back in 2015 or whenever it was.
Mm-hmm.
You bet. We've been really lucky along the way. Like, so as this legislation has been shaped, like, we've been really lucky to have the input and guidance of certain sponsors, in the assembly and in Albany. We've been super lucky to have the guidance of Sandy Galiff and Senator Skoufis have really recognized the value of this type of legislation and have been with us from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And something that has been just, I think, confusing for those of us who aren't into politics and government, those of us who do not have master's degree in public policy. As Jean frequently reminds me when we talk about this stuff, because I'm like, I want it now, and Jean's like, no, but I mean, it's been really, I'm going to say, interesting on the one hand. I mean, it has been interesting, but it's been frustrating to kind of get to this point. Like, it seems we get to this point frequently where we are told that, yeah, man, it's right on the verge. It's right on the verge of coming to the floor. And then it gets kind of swatted away by other legislative priorities, not because it's a bad bill, but just because this is the nature of legislative priorities. And that's something that I think I've learned anyway, is that lawmaking bodies are really responsive to, current demands and current pressures. In these last few years, there's been a few things going on in the world. There've been a few things occupying Albany.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that point where it's like, we'll get from our sponsors to get, oh no, it's on the verge.
Mm-hmm.
And then other priorities will come on in. But
so just, I think for our listeners, it might be helpful to just talk about some of the things that are in the bill. One of the things in the bill is that the practitioner has to put in a large print format exactly what activities they're going to do that may involve risk. So whether it's trust exercises, strength exercises, a sweat lodge, whether it's different activities that really are where coercive control techniques are being used, whether they're activities that involve things like food deprivation, sleep deprivation, water deprivation, social isolation, exposure to loud music, firewalking, hypnosis, activities that use breath manipulation to limit oxygen levels and induce altered mental states, obstacle courses. So it's very specific with lots of different activities. And then a provision that clearly and conspicuously states the necessary information for people to cancel if they decide that they don't want to attend once they have seen what the potential risks are, and then a comprehensive risk management program. If you're asking people to take a risk, you have to provide reasonable protection for them taking that risk. When you attend a marathon, there's risk involved, but you're going to have water tents, you're going to have medical personnel on hand. So that gets spelled out as well. Medical attention needs to be present. And if people are being asked to take an emotional risk, mental health professionals that have licenses need to be present to help mitigate the risk that people have been willingly taking. Because in the past, when people have willingly taken a risk, people go, well, they took a risk. Well, yeah, but
everybody has to sign a waiver at these events.
That's right.
You always get a waiver, but you never get the corollary to the waiver, which is,
that's right.
What is the event organizer doing to help mitigate these risks? And, one of the things that I think we like to recognize is that people love things like this. People love Tony Robbins's Firewalk. People love the Sweat Lodge at Spiritual Warrior. People get this feeling, and this is a real thing that people go through, where doing a risky activity, taking that risk, pushing yourself in a way that you may not have thought you could, can be really impactful for people. It can have like a real, effect on their feeling of their ability to overcome whatever it is in their lives that's holding them back. This is one of the big reasons that people go to events like this. So I like that in this bill, it recognizes that, it's okay to run an event that has these types of activities in them. And that can still be really interesting and exciting and beneficial for people. But you just need something to make sure that they're not going to be harmed in a way that would be really unexpected. I mean, nobody expects that you're going to go to a so-called sweat lodge and die from it, because sweat lodges have been run for a long time without people getting hurt, but they're run by people who have apprenticed for many, many years in how to run them. So
sure.
Yeah, it's just this issue of like, it's okay to do this. It's okay to have an event that's run by somebody who doesn't have some sort of credential, but then there needs to be a plan in place to deal with any types of unforeseen like tragedies or any kind of accident that could happen at the event.
Sure.
Emergency information that they weren't even within cell range.
Right.
at this event, that things need to be put in place so that if something happens that's truly an accident, there's access to take care of that immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So,
What we're really talking about is a concept in the mental health field that we call informed consent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because no one in the world is saying that you don't have a right to take risks. You do. And for that matter, engaging in mental health treatment is a risk. Engaging in medical health treatment is a risk.
mm-hmm.
But in mental health and medical settings, there needs to be meaningful, informed consent. That means that when you come to me as a psychologist, I'm going to be upfront about the methods that I use, so you can make a meaningful decision about whether you're into it or not.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
One of the big selling points of a subset of these types of events was the secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is one of the reasons why the industry pushes back on this, because they love the idea that they can sell a mystery box for $10,000. And I think they realistically feel that if they are required to list what they're going to do at this week-long retreat, there are some people who would be like, I'm not into it, and they would lose business.
Mm-hmm.
So they accurately perceive this to be a threat to their bottom line. But in this case, it's a very necessary threat, because there needs to be meaningful, informed consent if you're going to take a risk.
And this is part of, the consumer education angle of things, that, there's something exciting about this idea of the mystery, but we're trying to tell people, okay, I get that, but that's a bit of a red flag. Like,
you bet.
When you're dealing with, your mental health or your physical health, these are not, you don't want to have that element of mystery. That's not safe, because this is, it really becomes this sort of safety issue. So,
And what you're saying, Jean, I think is really important for people to understand. We're not against experiences. We know that some people really love experiences, and Kirby was a very physical person. And some people are just, that is really going to, as you say, be impactful and powerful for them and really important. And they're always going to gravitate towards the experience. And I think experiences are awesome. I think they're great. But whoever is giving the experience has to take responsibility to let people know if a risk is involved, and to also tell them what I'm going to do to protect you and keep you safe. Not just say, trust me, but show you that I'm going to have things in place that will take care of you if there's an accident, if something happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the law of attraction, Jenny, would say that you're just, those are negative beliefs, and you're setting yourself up for negative law. And I kind of joke about that, but that is the spiel, right? There is a subset of these personalities who, if you bring this to them and say, look, you need to be clear about what I'm walking into, because I want to give meaningful, informed consent, they really will come back at you with, well, your lack of faith disturbs me. How do you expect this to work for you if you can't go all in? Do you not trust me? I'm your guru. Do you not trust me?
Yeah.
And this is where we see elements of coercive control. And we'll be talking more about this throughout Seek Week and some of our other events. But
and I think the piece to this is it's hard for people to imagine. We have a willful suspension of disbelief, because people say, well, this person's running a business. They wouldn't deliberately put me in danger. That would be crazy. You wouldn't do that. That would, if someone gets really seriously hurt here, that's going to blow up his business. So that person would not do that. So then that buys into that desire to just trust and throw caution to the wind and just go, I'm all in. So we've always felt that we need both tenets of this organization. Let's
Yeah.
try to do whatever we can to try to make the industry more responsible, but at the same time, let's educate people as to, you know, what they're looking for, what it is they want, how to evaluate their own vulnerabilities, and
Mhm.
protect themselves.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think what we're talking about here is, Glenn, you brought up this idea last night and tonight that we're not just talking about bad actors. We're not just talking about the bad guys in the industry. We're also getting to the kind of culture of this industry. And some of these things are kind of like cultural issues that aren't going to be addressed if we're just talking about the bad guys. So we've talked, we had an episode of our podcast all about the law of attraction. And that was a really popular episode. People liked it. And, one of the things we said was, yeah, like there's something interesting and probably like accurate in the idea of the law of attraction. The idea that a positive mindset kind of sets you up to have more positive experiences and have more positive things happen in your life. There's probably something there. But there's also this kind of insidious thing that slides into the self-help industry where if you've put everything on the law of attraction to the point where, you're saying, I can't even talk about risk or think about risk at my event because it's going to attract something bad to my event, which is a mentality that we heard after Sedona. Which was just like kind of mind-boggling, but that is something that we heard from people. Oh, well, they must have done something to attract this to them. That's the kind of, I almost want to say it's like something rotten within the industry that unless we address that kind of issue, it doesn't matter. You're dealing with the bad guys is going to be a game of whack-a-mole. There's something deeper there that both the practitioners and the consumers need to understand about, you can't just positive mindset your way out of certain physical realities.
Well, you say that, and yet that episode of our podcast about the law of attraction was so popular, I manifested that. You know that, right? Like I sat here and I meditated, I drew it right in.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, when we're talking about the industry and we're talking about kind of the structure of the industry, something I say frequently, I say it so often, I sound like a broken record. My people listening to this are going like, he sounds like a broken record all the time. Don't listen to him. But something I always say is that something that is powerful enough to change your life positively is also powerful enough to mess you up. Like if something has the potential to powerfully impact your life in a good way, by definition, it has the potential to negatively impact your life, right?
Yes.
And if that's true, then we need to take this idea of proportional risk seriously.
Yeah.
When I support people in developing trauma recovery plans, like you can ask anybody I work with, like a big chunk of what we do is planning for the unexpected. Now, does that mean that we are wanting triggers to happen every minute of the day? No, it's an acknowledgement of the fact that stuff happens that we're not expecting. But never underestimate the potential narcissism and egotism of certain self-help personalities. Like we use James Arthur Ray as an example. I don't think James didn't have medical folks standing by because he was dumb. Although but no, I don't think that's the case. I think he was arrogant enough to think this couldn't possibly go wrong. Right. So there's no accounting for human error. There's no accounting for human egotism and that kind of thing. So
yeah,
we have words from our sponsors, don't we? We have from our legislative sponsors, right?
Yeah, from our legislative sponsors. So we've had, as we mentioned, we've had our legislative sponsors who have been with us kind of right from the beginning, and we're really grateful to them. Senator Skoufis actually came to our event last year, and so this is our Senate sponsor, and I'll play a little message that we had from him. So this is our Senate sponsor, Senator James Skoufis.
Hi everyone, I'm Senator James Skoufis. I'm the proud sponsor of Senate Bill 1155, which is all about transparency, consumer safety, and accountability for self-help practitioners. I first met George and Ginny Brown several years ago. They approached my office with a heartbreaking story in hopes of addressing a system that failed their daughter Kirby. Their determination to transform their grief into a force for positive change was inspiring. They shared memories of Kirby and the tragic story that had led them to found Seek Safely, an initiative that raises awareness against irresponsible actors in the self-help community. It was a no-brainer that something had to be done in Kirby's name to honor her legacy by preventing what happened to her from happening to anyone else. Our bill would ensure New Yorkers are informed about the potential risks and dangers associated with activities like sweat lodges that are often hosted by self-help practitioners. It's time that self-help practitioners are held accountable for their actions. I'm immensely proud to stand alongside the Brown family as we champion this legislation, which is long overdue to pass and be signed into law. As we gear up for the upcoming legislative session, I remain fully committed to seeing this effort through in Kirby's memory. Thank you all for your support of Seek Safely and working to make New York a more responsible, safer state.
So thank you to Senator Skoufis for those words of encouragement and for your continued support with this bill. One of the things that we also wanted to talk about tonight was the fact that there are some things that you guys can do to kind of help support this effort, especially if you're a New York State resident, but even if you're not a New York State resident, reaching out to your local representatives, it has an impact. I mean, they don't hear from a ton of their constituents. So when they do hear from constituents, they pay attention. We want to let them know that this is something that's on our radar. So if you're a self-help consumer and you want to know that you're going to be protected at a self-help event, or you want to know that you can expect informed consent when you're at an event, this is the kind of thing that you want to be asking your representative to get behind. So we also have a message from our assembly sponsor, Dana Levenberg, and I will play that for you right now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dana Levenberg. I'm the Assemblywoman representing the 95th Assembly District, which is a little chunk of Westchester County that goes from Briarcliff Manor and Austining up to Peekskill, and then a little piece of Putnam County, Cold Spring, Garrison, Nelsonville, town of Phillipstown. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight and to recognize all of the incredible work that you have been doing on behalf of those very precious lives that were lost. And Kirby, James, and Liz, I know that they're looking down on you and thanking you for learning from them and bringing the lessons out into the world to improve lives for so many people. I also just wanted to give a big shout out to my predecessor, Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff. She has very, very large shoes to fill, but I'm happy to be carrying the torch on this bill to protect those self-help seekers from an industry that might be taking advantage of them, and make sure that we bring ethics and regulation to those who are those self-help gurus, professed people who are trying to make it better maybe for others, but we want to make sure that they're not taking advantage of people or putting them in unsafe situations while others are looking to grow themselves and find their own path forward. So I'm very happy that we have been able to take some steps to hopefully move this bill forward next session, working together with Senator Skoufis's office. And again, a big shout out to Rebecca in my office, who's my legislative director, who is also passionate about making sure that we keep people safe in those people who are seeking growth and personal improvement, that they aren't taken advantage of. And she's been working hard, as well as one of my interns who took it upon herself to make this her intern project when she was working in my office from January to June, to look at this bill and the legislation to see what might have been some sticking points and what we maybe could do to make it better and move it forward, so that we can make sure that we do protect those seeking help. And I think that we're moving in that direction. I believe that Rebecca has actually spoken with Ginny, and I'm grateful for the feedback that we've received from you. We know that you guys are boots on the ground, and that's so important, but we also want to make sure that we can actually have a bill that moves forward. So hopefully this session, we can do that, again, with your help. It's so important to have advocates who are on the ground with people who are looking for that help. And I know you've been collecting signatures, reaching out, doing so much good work in the field of educating people. So let's make sure that we continue to work together to get this bill moving this session. I know that I'm going to do whatever I can as a sponsor of this bill to do that. And again, I hope that we can partner with you to make that all happen.
So yeah, thanks again to Assemblywoman Levenberg, and it's been amazing to have her on board. She's a new Assemblywoman. She, won the seat that Sandy Gilliff used to occupy. So we're really happy that she was on board with us right from the get-go. That's been really awesome.
Okay.
Every time I watch one of those videos, I'm like, wow, we've done a lot.
Yeah.
Like when we're involved day to day, it's like we get frustrated with like this thing isn't moving forward at all. But really, I mean, one of the things that I think is useful about things like Seek Week and the Kirby Jam is to take a look back and say that over the last decade, we've really kind of moved the Overton window. We've really moved the game. Gene, you were saying things that you can do to help us along. So sure, you can reach out to your elected representatives and make them aware that this is a problem. Unregulated, uncredentialed self-help practitioners. We never know what to call them. We don't like to call them gurus, but unregulated self-help practitioners, figures, are offering events and products and services that are under scrutinized and under regulated. You can do that. Something big that you can do, and you know what I'm going to say next, something big that you can do to support our efforts is this week we are raising funds. If you go to the Dr. Glenn Patrick Doyle Facebook page, or my personal Facebook page at Glenn Patrick Doyle, you'll see the Facebook fundraiser that we have going on. We do this once a year. Like sometimes we also do like little birthday fundraisers or whatnot, but our big fundraising push is once a year. And people ask, like, so what do you use this money for? Part of what we do is, we stay engaged with this legislative process. It allows us to do things like outreach. It allows us to do things like education. It allows us to do things like Keep the Sikh Safely podcast, where we tell these stories and we push these ideas kind of out to a wider audience. It keeps us in business. So if you don't happen to be in New York State and you don't have the opportunity to reach out to your elected representatives, but you still believe in this cause and you still find value in the work that we do, head on over to my page and throw us a couple bucks. I mean, it really, really makes the difference. The vast majority of our support comes in small, relatively small dollar donations from folks just like you.
Yep.
That's my spiel. That's my pitch.
I like it.
I was gearing up to that. I was like,
I like when you do that. I hate asking people for money, but it's true. We do need money to keep operating. Oh yeah. I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us tonight as well. I see you guys there on Facebook, on YouTube, leaving comments. This idea of informed consent really resonated with the people who are viewing tonight, because again, I think that this is a concept that we've come culturally to start to understand a lot better, just even in this last decade, last 5 years even. And that's a really big thing when it comes to, again, people seeing the need for this kind of legislation. So I'm glad that that is resonating with all of you out there watching. And yeah, you can also go to seeksafely.org. We've got links to our auction up there and links to donate as well. And you can also find more information about the legislation. I probably will need to do a little updating soon as we get closer to the new session and we find out exactly what the bill that will be tabled will look like. We keep updating that as the things change. So, but you can definitely go there and find some more information. Just seeksafely.org/legislation or the legislative tab at the top of our website. I also want to acknowledge one of our board members who couldn't be with us tonight, but Tony Kirby, who is also a family member. Tony has been like the driving force behind this legislation from our end of things for many, many years. We really leaned on him in part because he worked for the New York State Thruway Authority for many years. So he had contacts in the New York State government. And I mean, it can be hard sometimes to reach people or to get them to reply because they're busy. And Tony just never, he's been on the case. And I think it's his efforts are a large part of the reason why we've got Senator Skoufis on our side. We've got Assemblywoman Levenberg on our side. They know that this is important. They understand that it really needs to happen. And so we're really, really grateful to my Uncle Tony.
Yeah, Tony's been great and so appreciative. Meetings that I had with him, with legislators in Albany, people in the State Department, people on the Consumer Protection Committees. So Tony has done an amazing job and has been really helpful in getting us where we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Jean, what does the rest of Seek Week look like?
All right. Well, we've got, again, you can go to seeksafely.org. We've got the whole schedule up there. But tomorrow night, we're going to change gears a little bit. We won't be on Facebook and YouTube. Tomorrow night, we're going to be live on Instagram. Yeah. And tomorrow night is going to be a fun one. It's our self-help geek off.
Self-help geek off.
Yeah. With the
entertainment.
Yeah, with the two docs. So we've got Dr. Doyle and Dr. Christine Whalen. And if you have ever listened, if you've ever caught Dr. Christine Whalen on our podcast, you'll know how clearly Dr. Christine and Dr. Glenn could just talk for hours about self-help books, self-help people and personalities.
Mm-hmm.
I won't let them talk for hours tomorrow, but I am going to let them just kind of go.
Well, we'll see. We'll see about that.
Have a good time. Yeah,
I don't know.
I guess we'll see what happens. I'll get the coffee ready, I guess. So that'll definitely be a fun one.
Whenever we have Christine Whalen on our podcast, again, I spoke to this last night. The process of our podcast is we ramble for sometimes a couple hours, and then our editors will, they chop it down to like a listenable 50 minutes or so. And that task is particularly difficult when Christine is our guest, because she and I love to rap. We love to rap about self-help. And so tomorrow night, we are just we're gonna wrap. Jean has the enviable task of moderating us. And,
she sure does.
we'll talk about self-help, because again, something that I feel strongly about is our org is not anti-self-help. Like, most of us are involved because we are self-help people. Kirby Brown was a self-help person.
Absolutely.
Right? So tomorrow night is true to this spirit of the org. We like self-help. We want self-help to be safe and accessible and ethical and transparent. Mm-hmm. So that's tomorrow night.
That's tomorrow night. Wednesday
Instagram
night.
Live.
Yeah, tomorrow night. Cindy, tomorrow night is at 8 p.m. Eastern time. That's 7 p.m. Central time.
Yep.
So that's tomorrow night. Wednesday night, we'll be doing kind of our podcast sizzle reel. We're going to play some of our favorite sizzles, some of our favorite clips from the podcast. And Glenn and I will be there. And again, you're welcome to join us. That'll be back here on Facebook and YouTube. So if you join us, you can ask us questions. You can tell us what you love about the podcast. If you hate anything about the podcast, I guess we'll take that under advisement as well. That's fine. So that's on Wednesday. Thursday, we'll be back on Instagram again with Ask Dr. Doyle. So you can ask some interesting questions about trauma recovery, mental health, self-help. That'll be
or
on
the Beatles, classic
or the
rock.
Beatles.
We can talk
or
about music.
Abbey Road the Cat.
Abbey Road the Cat. Hey, I got to tell you guys something. Abbey Road the Cat. I don't know if I told you guys this. Abbey Road the Cat is generating fan art. Did I tell you this?
No.
I have now received the second piece of Abbey Road fan art that has been sent in by a fan, and so I'll post them on Instagram in a little bit. But,
one of our viewers, Dr. Glenn, wants to know if you will sing.
I might sing. You know what? So right after this, I'm going to head on back to the Dr. Glenn Patrick Doyle. So we did this last night. I don't know if you guys know this. Last night after the stream, I went back to my page and talked about James and Sedona for another hour and a half, because I know you guys love talking about it. But so anyway, whenever I'm on my page live streaming while I wait for people to show up, we sing a little ditty. Last night we sang a little bit of Beatles. So maybe we'll sing.
All right.
Friday night, we're doing Kirby stories.
Yeah, Friday night's going to be Kirby stories. And then on Saturday, we're going to have a special interview with Jenny Brown.
With Jenny Brown, founder of Seek Safely.
Yeah, exactly. So again, you can get that schedule breakdown. I've posted it on, Facebook and all around a couple times. But if you go to our main page, seeksafely.org, we've got all that information there, what the topics are, the time, and where to find them. So yeah, we hope to see everybody tomorrow as well. Thank you for everyone who stuck with us tonight. You guys all kind of hung out the whole time, which is amazing. I hope it was interesting and informative about what we're doing with this legislation. And thank you all for your comments. We really appreciate it. It's good. It's always good to know that this stuff is kind of making sense to people and resonating. So we very much appreciate everyone who's been watching. All right. Thanks, Dr. Glenn. Thank you, Jenny.
See y'all. See y'all soon.
We'll see ya.
Okay.
Night, night.